All right, hi everyone. So today's video is about the little blurb that we put at the bottom of every video, and it basically talks about how me and Matt, or anyone else that comes onto this channel or video platform, are not necessarily experts. They don't have any PhDs or qualifications or anything like that, right?
Sure. Do you want me to read it out?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so at the bottom of every video you will see something like this. Lee and Matthew are not experts. We do not have PhDs or a degree in any field except perhaps the School of Hard Knocks. Our primary appeal to authority will be the Bible, personal example, and the God-given powers of logic and common sense that everyone has. The wisdom from above does not need qualification or accreditation apart from humility, self-awareness, and a desire to serve others. To the poor, the gospel is preached, which has led us to our subject title today, We're Experts, so pay attention. So tell me, Lee, what are your qualifications?
Well, at a very young age, I got myself a PhD in fencing installation. And
Extremely hard course, I
it was a
heard.
very extremely hard course. You had to,
Put fences
you
up.
had to finish year 10, which I did. I got through it, and and then someone chose me in the local place, and no, I don't have any PhDs or qualifications. I have a PhD in results, and Matthew has a PhD
In noble aspirations.
so yeah.
But my qualifications, I've got an advanced diploma, but my advanced diploma is in electronic servicing.
Yep.
So I was trained how to fix televisions, which back in the day was important and relevant because they're expensive. Well, who gets their TV fixed nowadays? So my qualifications have been made redundant by all the cheap Chinese-made consumer goods that are out there. And these days I work in a bank,
Yep.
looking after other people's money. All right, so some may say, well, why, if none of you are qualified, why should anyone listen to two guys rabbing on about life, anxiety, depression, family life, the Bible even,
Yep.
if we don't have any qualifications? And frankly, we're not that good looking either.
Yeah. Well, speak for yourself.
Exactly.
But yeah.
But if you want to become an engineer, if you want to become a rocket scientist, if you want to become a doctor, if you want to specialize in any particular field, we are probably the last people that anyone needs to listen to, right?
Yeah, that's right.
But when it comes to the Bible, when it comes to life and life experience, well, this is where the bar is leveled. You know, everyone's on the same playing field. Everyone's gone through life. Everyone's experienced life. The Bible is not a hard book in that sense. The wisdom of the Bible is designed for uncomplicated people.
Yep.
To the poor, the gospel is preached, is what Jesus said. And so in that way, everyone's got something to contribute. Everyone's got something to offer. We've all got a life experience that we
It's
can share.
experience, isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. Things that we've gone through that might benefit others. Now, you've spoken a lot about anxiety, Lee.
Yeah, so I did have anxiety. I didn't even know I had it. You know, when I was a teenager, I thought
That was you.
I just had some weird nagging thing in my head that wouldn't go away, and I guess because I didn't know it was anxiety, I didn't have such an attachment to it.
Yeah.
And then it came again when I was quite stressed with work and things like that. But yeah, I did go to an expert, and they sort of said, look, this is what you've got. Here's a list of things that fix it, you know. And yeah, I guess I did listen to them and to a certain extent and practice what they told me, as a smart person, I guess, or intelligent person would, because they've got a PhD. But what really helped me was speaking to family members, people in our church that actually had the problem themselves, gone through it, gone through the pain that I had gone through, and said to me, Lee, look, this is what's worked for me. This is my life experience. You're going to get through it. God loves you. You know, we're all here for you. You'll get through it. Life's not always going to be like this forever. And gave me a few tips that worked for them. Some of them worked, some of them didn't. But that really helped, having that connection with someone. I find is far better than, you know, a study that was done by whoever. You know?
Popping a pill.
Or even popping a pill. You know, I knew that wasn't an answer to my anxiety, was popping a pill, because I had some chemical imbalance. I knew I had an imbalance in my life, the way I was thinking, the way I wasn't in line with God, and I knew that was wrong and that needed to change. And when I aligned myself with God and God's ways and slowed down and listened to His Word and prayed and meditated, that's when things started to get really good and get better.
So similar with depression. About 6 years ago, I went through
Wow,
a
6
lengthy
years ago.
6 years. It's a long time, mate. It's a long time.
I only felt like, not that long ago.
You were 21.
There you go.
No, and look, the same. I went to a psychologist and visited my doctor regularly. I was quite bad, so for a period of time they did give me antidepressants, which kind of make you feel from really, really bad to kind of functioning normal. But I knew it wasn't the long-term answer. It wasn't the reason why I'd gotten there, and ultimately there was something in the way I saw life, myself, God, other people that I needed to fix.
Yep.
And exactly the same as you, Lee. I think the counsellor lady with the very basic certificate in counselling, she was really, really helpful. She came and visited me every week.
Yep.
Sat down for half an hour, asked how I was going, gave me some real helpful tips. But one of the things that really turned me around was a lady at my church. I had started to think that depression, where you feel like someone's sawn off your head, torn out your personality, your sense of humour, your identity, and then they sew your head back on. And that's kind of my best description of depression. You feel like this hollow shell of a person that just goes to bed, loves bed, hates getting up, hates facing people, eats, showers, and goes back to bed again. That's kind of all depression is. And I was starting to think, well, is this it? Is this the new normal? Is this who I'm going to be? And she said, I know what you're going through. I've been through it myself. You probably think that you're never going to come out of this and this is who you are forever. She says, it's not true. Just ride it through. Step by step, baby steps, you will get through this. And that one phrase did more for me. It gave me hope. It gave me something to aim at. I was thinking that weeks was what it would take. I did set my expectations to months, and it just got me through. And so again, when you look back on your life, the major turning points is at conversations you have with people who care enough to try and help you out. And
well, yeah, that's it, isn't it?
And as you said, I mean, the experiences that they had with anxiety didn't perfectly line up with yours. Right? So none of them really lined up exactly the same.
No, they won't. No, but
and some things helped.
And some things helped, yeah.
And some things didn't help.
And it's even just having that connection of someone. It's like God really walking around in the flesh in a way.
That's right.
God, I guess, might not help you directly, but He does help you through other people. And it's them working in your lives that really help. They show that they care and that they love you. So,
well, that's how God answers prayers.
Mm.
God will rarely answer prayers with writing in the sky, or a bolt of lightning hitting you, or a voice from the heavens. But what God does is, through providence, He will direct somebody who's been through a similar thing, and that person will randomly come up to talk to you and just put their finger on exactly what you've been worried about, thinking about. And that's how God operates through other people, which is why personal example is such a powerful thing. Like from the day we're born, we learn the most by personal example, by watching, comparing,
watching other
measuring.
People. Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's why it's really important that if you can be part of a church or something, you can see other people that have walked the walk.
That's right.
And that not just talk the talk.
And the Bible's structured like this. So there's a passage in Romans 15 that says, all these things are written for our learning, that we through patience and example, that we through patience and comfort of the scriptures might have hope. And so Paul's kind of saying all these examples in the Bible are written for us, so you can get into the lives of these people, you can see where they went wrong, you can see where they went right, you can see the ones that failed, you can see the ones that succeeded, and you can see,
well,
hey,
talking
there you
about
go.
fail,
Talking about failing.
The chair almost failed.
My life's going through the floor. But they're there, rawness and all, so that we can actually gain inspiration and hope from the lives of normal, everyday people. And so when Lee and I talk about things like anxiety, family life, marriage, depression, grief, relationships, what we're going to try to do is as much as possible appeal to the authority of life experience. We're going to try and get people on who have not just experienced these things and gone through them, but actually come out the other end. And we'll talk about what they did and how they did there. And of
And
course,
how God helped them, obviously, through the Bible, the most
Absolutely.
important.
how their
thing, isn't
faith
it?
was strengthened by the whole process. And of course, not everything's going to line up with what you might be going through or people that you know who are going through the same thing. But through that act of caring and through the act of sharing and opening our hearts to one another, we gain comfort and we gain encouragement and we gain a lot of benefit from that, right? And not everything's going to match everyone's experience. But that's not the point, that we're sharing and we're using the authority of personal example, of mentoring one another, of encouraging one another through our examples.
And we hope that these videos do help you. And some things might, and some things might not.
Absolutely.
And it's just about getting those little gold nuggets that you might find to help you out.
Yeah, and look, we might refer to a study, we might refer to a statistic, things like that might bolster something that we're discussing, but we're not going to make that the basis of our authority. The bottom line, people need to have confidence in their own God-given powers of common sense, their own logic, and that's as much as possible what we're going to appeal to, things that make sense.
I mean, and the thing that we will be using is the Bible.
Exactly. I
You
mean,
know,
you
that's
look
the
at the Bible.
authority that we're going to be using.
Absolutely. And look, just on that note, when you look in the Bible at when God wanted something done, he rarely chose experts, he rarely chose specialists, he rarely chose people who thought that they were the right people for the job.
Yeah.
On the contrary, he chose people who actually didn't want to do the job, who were
That's
terrified
right.
by the prospect, who didn't think they could do it.
The perfect leaders, really. I mean,
Exactly.
these days you have leaders that they really want the power and they shouldn't be in place.
Exactly.
So yeah, sorry, what you were talking
No,
about.
no. There's a passage in Corinthians that talks about God's strength being made perfect in weakness.
Yeah.
And there's heaps of examples in the Bible of individuals who were completely underqualified to do what they were asked to do by God, but they rose up and did it anyway. So a couple of ones I thought of was the judges. You look at the book of the Judges, they were all mothers like Deborah. They were shepherds. They were just normal everyday people who were going through tough times, and God taps them on the shoulder and asks them to do extraordinary things. And they rose up, problems and issues and all, and they didn't do it perfectly, but they did it and they saved their country. And Moses, another one.
Yeah, Moses was another one, wasn't he? I guess when he
Well, he was qualified.
he was qualified to start off with. He,
That's right.
he was son of a pharaoh or whatever, and he really gave it a good shot. So I guess he had top marks for for giving it a go. Good effort.
Start the revolution.
It's double tick.
Kill an Egyptian.
Yeah, he killed an Egyptian, and he thought this is how it gets done. And he had a lot to learn. 40 years worth, in fact, where God made him made him quite humble. And
Sure.
even he had trouble speaking. I believe when you read the passage, he says, "This is not for me. This is not the job for me, God. Choose Aaron, choose someone else. Maybe they can do it." And he said, "No, you're the one. I've been using you. I've been training you. This is what it's all about."
When you're 40 years in the wilderness staring at the back end of a sheep, it does knock the stuffing out of you a little bit.
And that's why we live in Adelaide, in South Australia, isn't it? Because if you don't know where South Australia is,
It's the
that's
butt
why.
end of Australia.
That's why you don't know it, because it's in the middle of nowhere.
We're famous, you've probably heard of Barossa Valley. We're famous for our wine, that's about all we're famous for. Other than that, we're the retirement village for the rest of the country. So, but David's another one, a classic example that when Samuel was looking for a king, his own dad didn't even choose him.
Yeah.
He said, no, that's for the older boys, you just stay out there and look after the sheep. He wasn't even called to meet with Samuel.
Yeah.
So he wasn't even highly esteemed in his own family.
Yeah.
And when he became Saul's servant and Jonathan's friend, whenever Saul wanted to disparage him, he would call him the son of Jesse. Because David's grandmother, I think it was Ruth.
Yeah.
And his great-grandmother was Rahab the prostitute.
Yeah.
So he had Moabite blood, he had Canaanite blood, and he had prostitute blood in him. So David did not come from noble backgrounds. He was chosen from being a shepherd. made king. And so, and again, it shows you the whole process that God uses, that pedigree is not important, aristocracy is not important, bloodline is not important, your position, your wealth, your perceived status, none of that is important in God's estimation.
No.
And the line of Christ, I mean, what kind of people does Jesus' line contain?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's got harlots, it's probably got, who else is in there?
Ruth's in there as well.
Yeah, Ruth's in there.
Ruth's
as
the
well.
line of Christ. David the murderer.
Yeah, David the murderer. Yeah, so, and God picks Jesus out of this line to,
That's right.
it's quite crazy. And I mean, we talked about the disciples, didn't we?
Not quite.
Okay.
We're getting to
that bit, yeah.
Because
okay.
it reminds me of a passage in Corinthians 1 verse 26 where Paul says, you see your calling, there's not many wise, not many noble, not many mighty after the human measure of things, but God has chosen the foolish things of this world.
Yeah.
And in that regard, I think you and I are abundantly qualified to talk about these things.
That's it.
Exactly. Look, so moving on to Jesus, as you said, when he chose his disciples, what kind of men were they?
Yeah, well, they didn't make the cut.
No.
And you know that because they were doing their father's trade. If they had made the cut, they would have been,
synagogues,
in the
temples.
Synagogues, in the temples,
Right.
saying, teaching the people. But they weren't good enough. But yet Christ walks down with his lovely long flowing hair and the blue sash. No, sorry. But
according to the kiddie Bibles.
According to the kiddie Bibles, no. But Jesus comes down and he chooses them, and they say, and they couldn't believe it. They dropped their nets and follow him, because they knew how such a great honor it was to follow a rabbi, or in this case, Jesus, the best teacher in all time.
That's right.
And they folled him.
And what did he call himself? He was Jesus of Nazareth.
Yeah. Which was like being Liam Matt of South Australia.
Exactly.
People would think, where's Nazareth?
Exactly. The phrase was, does any good thing come out of Nazareth? What's come out of Nazareth? And they scorned Nazareth. It was in Galilee, and Galilee was already considered to be a place of mixed blood, where money was valued higher than spiritual things. So he was from Galilee, and he was from the backwaters of Nazareth. And he called himself Jesus of Nazareth. And if you were Jesus and you wanted to have a message that had appeal, would you pick a tax gatherer amongst your disciples?
No, I'd call myself, but I'd also call myself Jesus, King of the world.
Exactly.
But yeah, I wouldn't pick a tax collector. I wouldn't pick fishermen. I'd be hand picking and cherry picking, all the rich and famous and
by
smart
the world's
and
measure.
PhD, by the world's measure. Yeah.
Exactly. So and look, you remember the time when the disciples appeared before the streets. What was it? After the time Peter and John healed the lame men.
Yep.
And they were hauled before the Sanhedrin. And it says in Acts chapter 4, it says that when they perceived that they were unlearned and ignorant man, but when they heard the words that came out of their mouth, they knew they'd been with Jesus. And so the words they spoke were with power, they were with confidence. They'd just seen a dead man raised from the dead. They knew that they weren't going to die until God was ready for them to die. And they knew nothing's going to stop them. Nothing can touch us. Yet the way they spoke was with the accent of Galilee. They behaved in a manner that stood them out as normal, common folk. Yet they had been with Jesus. And in one of Jesus' prayer in Matthew 11, he thanks God and he says, I thank you that you've hidden your wisdom from those who esteem themselves wise and prudent. So people who thought that they were doctors of the Bible, who thought that they were better than other people, they didn't get his message. They didn't understand him, where he was from, where he was going, what he was all about. But the poor heard him gladly. It says, to the poor the gospel was preached.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right? And so who was it that led the charge to crucify him?
It was the Jews.
The same people that showed their credentials and called themselves doctor and scribes and lawyers as in lawyers after the law.
Well, they probably couldn't believe that Jesus, or if there actually was a Jesus, a son of God, they thought surely that he would have walked straight to them first,
That's right.
rather than go looking for fishermen. You know what I mean?
Go to Galilee.
Yeah. So
Well, the Jews had a saying. It says, if you want to make money, go to Galilee. If you want to be spiritual, come to Jerusalem. Not exactly those words, but that was their phrase. Galilee was not the place you went to if you wanted serious
spiritual.
If you wanted tradies and people just involved in commerce, that's where you went. And look, the great irony of it is that the doctors of the Jewish law, the Old Testament scriptures, who would spend all day, every day, debating line upon line, every single jot and tittle, they were the ones that ended up crucifying their very own Messiah. So they spent all their lives looking for Messiah, wanting Messiah, desiring Messiah, every year praying for Messiah. When he comes, they don't recognize him and they kill him. Right?
Because they can't believe it. Yeah, they can't believe. Yeah.
And they're the experts. So being an expert, having credentials, doesn't necessarily qualify you in wisdom. And it certainly doesn't qualify you in the wisdom that comes from above. And Paul spends a lot of time, if you've got time, read Corinthians chapter 2, because Paul contrasts the wisdom that comes from the world and the way men and human beings measure wisdom compared to how God measures wisdom. And Paul says that there's a brand of wisdom that unless you have a spiritual mind, unless you are a humble person, unless you're a contrite person who's aware of your weaknesses and your problems, who's not trying to elevate yourself above others and measure and compare and climb the ladder, if you're not that kind of person, there's a kind of wisdom that's just for you people. So God says, I look for people who are humble and contrite. Contrite is you don't think yourself anything amazing. You don't think you're an incredible person. You don't think you're better than other people, that's for sure. And there's a particular brand of wisdom that only those people will understand. Only those people will get. And he says, whereas a natural man, the one that's trying to make it in this life, the one that's trying to climb over everybody else to get to number one, get to the top of the ladder, they're oblivious to this wisdom. They don't see the point in it. They don't understand it. And it's this amazing passage at the end where he says, the spiritual man discerns all things. Right? So he knows what it's like to be natural. He's been a natural man himself. But it says he himself is understood by nobody. So no one knows why when someone has a go at him, he doesn't answer back. Why he's not desperate for a promotion, why he's not chasing money at every opportunity. No one understands why he will help somebody who can't offer anything in return. No one gets that. But he's motivated by something that's indiscernible. Yet because he comes from a natural person, the spiritual man understands all things. And so that's the brand of wisdom that God's holding out to us.
Yep.
And it's in the passage I kept referring to was Isaiah chapter 66 verse 2. He is a humble and contrite spirit who trembles at the Bible. So if we hold the Bible as our authority.
That's what we hold as our authority. That's our PhD.
Exactly.
That's what we use. And experience. The Bible and experience. Isn't it?
Exactly, and that's all we need. And when we read that the Bible wasn't written for experts, but uncomplicated people, and the more humble you are, the more you're going to get it. And that's the most amazing thing. The more you think you're written a bit, the more you think you're amazing, the less you will understand. It's just one little example. You can edit it out if you want to.
I probably will.
One little example with the washing of the feet. When Jesus washed his disciples' feet.
Yep.
Every single disciple in that room was arguing, who's going to be the greatest? Who's going to be the greatest?
I love this story, yeah.
And then Jesus starts washing their feet. And Peter says, you will never wash my feet, Lord, because I know you're greater than all of us.
Yeah.
And then so he's constantly mindful of an opportunity to score points on his fellow disciples. Then Jesus says, well, if I don't wash your feet, you have no part with me. And Peter goes, well, wash all of me, my hands, my face, and my head, because he wants to be again one up. So everything that came out of Peter's mouth in that highly competitive
was trying to be the best.
Was trying to be the best, climb over other people. But what Jesus was showing him, and in John it says it amazingly, it says Jesus knowing he was come from God.
That he came from heaven, basically.
And he was going back to God.
Yeah.
Took up the towel and he did it. And when you see someone that's truly good at what they do, that's not trying to prove anything, they've been doing it a long time, they know their stuff, it's nothing special to them, they just do it. They just get the job done. They're not trying to prove anything. They're not using their actions as a measuring point of, oh, I'm this kind of person, I would never lower myself. They don't see life like that. Yet there's some people that will never stoop to touch someone else's feet. They'd never stoop to help someone out that really needed it, because I'm up here and that's for other people. And that's just one example of where Jesus did something as a sign of true greatness, as a sign of someone who knew absolutely he had nothing to prove to anybody else. All right? Yet the disciples saw the very same thing, and because they were in that animal pride thing where they were trying to all clamber over one another, they saw something totally different, and they didn't get the point. And Jesus, at the end of that process, he says, do you know what I've done? He says, happy are you if you do it. And he says to Peter earlier on, he says, what I do, you don't understand, but later on you will understand. And of course, Peter, after he'd been through that great trial of denying Jesus, did understand. His whole heart was open and empty, and he became a servant from there on after, and he got it. So a lot of questions come out of this, Lee.
Yep.
I mean, what is the wisdom that comes from humility? So if you're a humble person, what kind of wisdom can you understand that a proud person won't understand? So what's an example of this kind of thing? One of them is Jesus washing his disciples' feet, which we can talk about a bit later. What's the kind of thinking that leads to that? Two different kinds of thinking, two different kinds of looking at the world, two different kinds of behaving that allows one person, the humble person, to see what God wants them to see.
Well, the humble person is always learning. They know that. They're humble enough to know that they're not an expert, and they're continually going for that perfection, but they never get there. Whereas the expert goes, I've learnt all of this, I'm the expert, you listen to me,
Exactly.
I don't listen to anyone.
Exactly. And one thing I've learnt by being a dad is that some of the most profound lessons come from your own kids. And if you're the kind of father that goes, I'm the dad, you're the kid, be quiet, you can't teach me anything, well, you miss it, because your kids know you, sometimes better than yourself, and they stick it to you like you wouldn't believe. Like a child can hurt you in a way your wife never would. And there's lessons from there. There's lessons from God in that. And if you're too proud to actually go, well, you're a child, you're lower on the status ladder, I don't listen to you, well, you're gonna pick up on that either. So these lessons are all around us. I mean, the other question that comes out of it is, how far can you trust your own logic?
Yeah.
How far can you trust common sense? There's a certain point in which the wisdom of the crowd is not always wisdom, where going against the flow is always wisdom.
Well, that's where you need to come back to the Bible, isn't it?
Exactly.
I mean, that would be my answer.
And one thing we say a lot is that we have our God-given powers of logic and common sense. Well, is there evidence in the Bible that God's given human beings logic? And there is. Absolutely there is. And where does self-deception fit into all of this? So at what point do we trust our logic, and at what point are we actually fooling ourselves? Because self-deception is a massive issue with humans. If we're in the wrong state of mind, we can make ourselves believe what we want to believe.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's it.
I'm very good at that.
There's a lot of stuff out there and studies out there that you can, whatever you want to believe, you can reinforce that.
That's right. But we'll probably save that for another day. Suffice to say that whoever we talk to and whatever we talk about, life, the Bible, our experiences, the only authority we're going to be appealing to is common sense, logic, personal example, our personal walk, overcoming, and of course the authority of the Bible. That's what we're going to be doing. To the poor, the gospel is preached.
Well, thanks for that. Thanks for listening, and God bless.
Thank you.